Death at Devil's Bridge. Chapter 28. Come, Josephine, in my flying machine, up we go. American Music Hall Ballad, 1920s. Charles slumped in his leather chair in the library and held up his glass, as Kate poured his sherry and touched his shoulder. You'll feel better in a few days, he said sympathetically, when the disappointment has passed. I'm sorry to say I told you so, Harry Hodgson said in a gloomy tone, but I did warn you that no jury, no village jury at any rate, would be able to understand such complicated hocus-pocus. And I was right. Your presentation might have persuaded the Royal Academy, Charles, but the jurors were simply not able to hear it. They brought in the only verdict they knew how to bring: death by automotive mischance. It was the fingerprints that frightened them off, Dr. Bassett said, from the window where he stood looking out. Perhaps if you had ended your presentation with the corpuscle and the red grease on Dixon's trousers. But that was only half the evidence, Charles protested, and by far the less interesting half. The more comprehensible half, Bassett rejoined. It will be decades before a jury is capable of understanding fingerprint evidence, and it may never happen. The problem really was, Kate said, resuming her seat on the sofa beside Constable Lakin, that Bess Gurdon's testimony couldn't be introduced, for fear of harming her reputation in the village, that is. But if Bess Gurdon had mentioned her flying ointment, Ned replied, the jury would have dismissed it just as they did the fingerprints and corpuscles, as so much as magical nonsense. However, seen from another point of view, Hodgson went on, as if no one else had spoken, the Crown didn't lose much. That's right, Lakin said. Practically speaking, even had Dixon been bound over, the prosecution could not have proved that he intended to murder Albrecht. All that could be argued was that he meant to cause mischief in the operation of the motor car in which he thought Dunstable would be riding, as a way of getting even for the injuries he had suffered at the man's hands. Dixon could not have anticipated that Dunstable would spend the day in the dung heap, or that Albrecht would impale himself upon the broken tiller. Charles roused himself. I suppose you're right, but it is frustrating to know that science cannot assure that justice is done. Kate entirely concurred with Charles. If this had been one of Bill Bardwell's crime stories, the plot would have been tied up much more neatly, the culprit apprehended, summoned to the bar, and punished. If his conviction could have been managed by no other means, the novelist would have arranged a confession, appropriately dramatic, of course, or even a suicide. Right and justice would have triumphed in the end, and the world would have been restored to order and normalcy under the law. To have events turn out otherwise was just too frustrating. The doctor came away from the window and sat down. It is a mistake to assume that justice will not be done, he said. There is more than one way to skin a cat, you know. Oh? Kate asked. I heard from Marston today. Constable and Dunstable have apparently forged a temporary alliance for the purpose of ruining poor Dixon. They have been busy in Threadneedle Street buying up Dixon's notes so that they can call them in, coming on top of the expenses of the patent litigations against the man, where he must defend himself. This will utterly ruin him. The coroner chuckled dryly. Poor Dixon indeed. Appropriate punishment, I should say. A civil penalty where a criminal could not be got. Kate found herself agreeing. Still, she said thoughtfully, it is Dunstable who must bear most of the responsibility for what happened this weekend, don't you think? He was the one who brought those men here and set them at one another's throats, all with the hope of making money, not to mention that he is a particularly odious man. Charles looked up from the pipe he was lighting. I think, Kate, you will have nothing to fear concerning Dunstable. I, too, heard from Marston. If rumour be trusted, the British Motor Car Syndicate is not long for this world, and we will shortly learn of a falling out between Ponsonby and Dunstable, and Dunstable will be the next victim of Threadneedle Street. And not a moment too soon either. We can only hope that some British inventor will emerge with a truly distinguished British vehicle to give us parity, or at least with the German and French, whether gas or electric or steam. Do you think electric and steam have a chance? Lakin asked curiously. After the beating those two cars took this weekend, I should say not. You're probably right, Charles said. Electricity holds a great promise, but must wait for the invention of a primary battery, and steam has been around long enough to have worked out the engineering problems, but people are still afraid of it. What about Henry Royce? Kate said. He seemed to show an interest toward the end of his visit. Do you think he will take up the challenge? It would be a good thing if he did, Charles said. I dare say he would construct a motor car that would be as reliable as a watch and as durable as the Tower of London itself. "You have a great deal of faith in that gentleman, Sheridan," the doctor said, "but at least we have something to be glad for. The motor cars are gone, and our village is left in silence." "For the moment," Harry Hodson said glumly, "but they'll be back. In a few years every man Jack will have one. It'll be worse than bicycles." Charles laughed. "And you shall have one too, Harry. Once the thing is perfected, keeping a motor car will be much less work than keeping and driving a horse." "I doubt it," Hodson said, frowning. He turned to Kate. "I trust, though, Kate, that you enjoyed your balloon flight." Kate brightened, remembering the several times she had flown on Monday, after Rose finished the repairs, and before the balloon was finally packed for return. "Oh, very much indeed," she exclaimed. "Of course, the balloon was tethered, but that did not detract from the experience. For me, or I'm sure for Bess Gurton or Miss Marston." The flight Kate made with Bess had been memorable. Seeing Bess's ecstatic face as she rose into the heavens, watching her enjoy the colorful autumn landscape spread out below, and pick out her neighbors' houses and her own with Charles' field glasses, it had been pure delight. "I think the vicar was equally pleased with his flight," Kate added. "I have no doubt that his sermons over the next few months will be decorated with aeronautical metaphors, and all the villagers will be eager to go up." She paused, thinking about the experience. "Do you suppose one day everyone will have flown in a balloon?" "Not in balloons, I shouldn't think," Charles said. "They are essentially uncontrollable, which makes them fit for little other than sport. Motorized heavier than air flight will soon be possible, however." The doctor chuckled. "I'll wager a fiver that chap Rolls will be the first one to try it. What a daredevil that fellow is, but he could not win Lady Henrietta's heart. I understand she put an end to his friendship with Miss Marston." "I think Miss Marston put an end to that herself," Kate said. "She's planning an around-the-world photographic tour, you know. A grand adventure of her own." Harry Hodson shook his head. "I have never thought much of gallivanting young ladies, especially when they are unchaperoned. What Lady Henrietta can be thinking." He scowled. "And of course there is Roger Thornton. He must be beside himself at the thought of that headstrong young girl going off God knows where." "I think," Kate said quietly, "that Roger Thornton has nothing to say about where Miss Marston goes. In my opinion, her refusal to consider the match has saved them both much unhappiness." "I quite agree," Dr. Bassett said with wry humor. "No man will want a wife who photographs his misdeeds and then shows them about." "Speaking of photographs," Charles said, getting to his feet, "I wonder if you would like to see the X-ray photographs I made yesterday of the bones in my hands. They are quite remarkable. Would you care to come down to the laboratory?" The men all rose. "Ah, science," Hodson said with a half-bitter mockery. "What subtle secret it reveals! The Latin pattern of the tip of the finger, the shadow of the bone beneath the flesh." Dr. Bassett, however, was more impressed. "The bones of the hand," he marveled. "Think of the applications in medical science, and who knows, soon we may be able to watch the very heart as it beats." "And soon," Kate said rather more somberly, "we will have no secrets at all." Historical note. "Contrariwise," continued Tweedledee, "if it was so, it might be, and if it were so, it would be. But as it isn't, it ain't. That's logic." Lewis Carroll, Through the Looking-Glass. You'll find three historical personages in Death at Devil's Bridge: Charles Rolls, Henry Royce, and Harry Lawson, to whom we've given the name Harry Dunstable. Since you've met them early in their automotive careers, you might be interested in knowing more about them. Charles Rolls, 1877 to 1910, was one of the first men in England to challenge the government's restrictions on the speed and operation of motor cars. He was only 19 when he imported a 3.5 horsepower Peugeot from France, at the time the most powerful car in England. Compare this to the 12 horsepower riding lawnmower you can see on sale at your local discount store. The next year, Rolls became a member of the Automobile Club in London and began to take part in auto races and reliability trials. In 1900, he and his 12 horsepower Panhard took first place in the London-Edinburgh race, and over the next few years he competed in most major European races, making a name for himself as an amateur racing car driver. He also began selling imported cars. The new Panhard et Levasseur and Minerva were his specialties. And in 1903 went into the new and used car business in Brook Street, Mayfair. Henry Royce, meanwhile, was making a different kind of history. Royce was born in 1863 and established himself after early years of hardship as an electrical engineer with a special genius for refining the work of others. His first such effort was an electric doorbell, but he was soon turning out an improved electric motor that earned a reputation for reliability and durability. Sometime after 1896, he became interested in automobiles and acquired a two-cylinder 10-horsepower de Courville, which he rebuilt several times, finally creating the first Royce automobile. It was at this point that Royce, the engineer and manufacturer, and Rolls, the dealer and promoter, came together. At an historic meeting in Manchester in 1904, they agreed that Rolls would have the exclusive right to sell Royce's new automobile, and that he would exhibit the forthcoming models at the Paris Salon in December, under the name Rolls-Royce. To promote the car, Rolls drove it in competition in Europe, America and England, demonstrating its speed and dependability. In only a few years, the Rolls-Royce was England's premier automobile. Rolls' daredevil streak showed itself not only on the ground but in the air, and his interest in flight grew, his fascination with automobiles diminished. He was an eager participant in ballooning, making over 170 ascents. His first documented balloon auto chase took place in 1902, some years after the events at Bishop Keep, from which he no doubt took the idea. But with the coming of heavier-than-air flight, he abandoned balloons for the aeroplane. In 1908, he went to France to study Wilbur Wright's new biplane and bought one. He was soon an expert aviator. In June of 1910, he made a record crossing of the Channel by flying non-stop from Dover to Calais and back in 90 minutes. The next month, he was flying in a restricted landing contest in Bournemouth when the overstretched tail of his plane collapsed. He was killed almost instantly, the first Englishman to die while piloting a plane. 5 years later, the Rolls-Royce company was faced with financial ruin when the luxury car market collapsed at the onset of the Great War. To save itself, it turned to the production of aircraft engines, for which it gained world renown. Harry Lord Lawson's story is less laudable, but opens an interesting window onto early automotive history in England. From all reports, Lawson seemed to have possessed the promoter's brassy business expertise and extroverted self-confidence. He started in the bicycle business in 1876. From bicycles, he moved into company promotions, buying up valuable patents, launching high-sounding companies, and getting out before the bubble burst. In 1895, he began to take over the infant motorcar industry. For over 2 years, his market manipulations and refusals to manufacture, why make cars when one could make more money by merely selling stock, virtually blocked the development of the industry. But in 1897, his elaborate edifice began to crack, and by the end of that year it was gone, and with it, so was the stockholders' money. In 1904, Lawson was prosecuted for fraud, went to jail for 12 months at hard labor. This concludes the reading of Death at the Devil's Bridge. I will obviously continue this series with the next chapter of the 12-book series being called Death at Rottingdean, a book which I've already acquired. And at the time of this being uploaded, I will have recorded, if not all, then most of that book already. These recordings are made for the sake of promoting reading and, to some extent, storytelling. And a good book can do that. I have decided that a lesser-known series, so the Victorian Mystery series, that I found at random would be a good choice for that. But I'm also reading more classical and more known works currently, and this is being recorded in the month of October 2024. I have also uploaded works by Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft, as well as I have other books in mind for future readings. I hope that you will listen to those as well, and perhaps even recommend books that I might enjoy reading and recording myself reading. Until next time, take care.